Hey everybody, this is Games Plus James and welcome back to our retro first-person shooter tutorial series. Now, we've got our basics of our world set up. We can run around, we can hit these walls and we can shoot our enemy over here. Let me get close enough to him. And the next thing we need to do is actually set it up so that we have a world for us to move around in. We really want to be able to create levels nice and easily. And the way we're going to do that is by using the tilemap system in Unity. So what we're going to want to do is, first of all, we're going to want copies of this wall for us to use in this section. So I'm going to go to my prefabs folder and I'm going to create a new folder in here that we'll call environment. And we're going to put the wall into there. So that's fine. Then I'm going to delete this wall like so. And then I'm going to delete this ground because we don't need this anymore. And we're going to start adding in some tilemap stuff for us to use. So I'm going to right click in my hierarchy. We're going to go to 2D object and tilemap. Then that gives us a tile grid for us to use that we can set up for our player to interact with. And then we're going to go and make a tile palette for us to be able to actually draw our elements in. So I'm going to go to my tile palette here. I'm going to create a new palette that we'll call, I'm going to call this sci-fi tiles. Create, and then it'll ask us to put this in a folder. So I'm going to go up to my assets folder and create a new folder called tiles, and in here we'll add another new folder called sci-fi tiles. Nice and simple. And we're going to select that folder, and now we have the ability to drag some sprites in here. So in the assets folder that we started out with, that will be linked again down below, we can go in here and into the art folder, and where we have tiles, we'll see there's a bunch of different tiles for us to use here. So what I'm going to do is click and drag these. So I'm going to grab this first tile, pop it in there, and you can see that wants to create a tile asset here. So we want to make sure that we put this in the correct folder, which is in the tiles folder, sci-fi tiles. So we're just going to do that for each of these objects here. Actually, to be honest, I'm going to multi-select these like so. Then we'll go, oh, no, that's the wrong folder, into tiles, sci-fi tiles, and boom. Okay, so we've got our different elements here now, and we can start using these to draw our map. So our first thing, I'm going to get this ground tile, I'm going to switch to the square or rectangle tool, and I'm just going to click and drag this out like so, and now we have a bit of ground. I'm also going to just hide my UI for the moment just so we can see what's going on. I'm going to make a nice big massive bit of ground here for us to use. Okay, so we've got this ground area, but we want to make some walls appear. And obviously we could use one of these sprites here and just draw in a bit of wall, and that would work perfectly fine. But of course, if we go and play the game, that doesn't mean anything. That just draws some walls on the ground, which obviously doesn't look great. So what we want is to be able to place a prefab when we draw a tile in our map. Now you could go and create a script for this. It's not too complicated of a thing. If you want to research, you kind of it's an interesting subject to study up on. But Unity also provides, I'm just going to delete these guys first. Unity provides some tools to tweak the tilemap system for free. So in there will be a link in the description down below this video, which will take you to this GitHub repository, and this is the Unity's 2D extras repository, and basically it has a whole bunch of extra tilemap stuff for us to use, and it's a really handy little place to go because there's a lot of cool things you can do with the tilemap system with the tools in here, and I 100% recommend that you read through the various different brushes you can have and see which ones will work nicely for you. But for our purposes, we're going to use a specific type of brush called, where are we? A rule tile, which will allow us to place prefabs nice and easily. So if we want to include this in our project, you need to download it. But there's a couple of things to be aware of. Now I'm in Unity, where are we? 29.1 up here, which is what this project was started in. So we want to make sure that there's a few different versions of this. If you go down to tilemap here, you can see there's different versions. So if you're in the 2017 version, 2018.2 and 2018.3, etc., we want to go to these different areas. So by default it's set up to work with the most recent version of Unity 2019.2, but we want to go with 2019.1. So to be able to get 2019.1 versions, you go up here to releases. Now if you're just getting the current version of Unity, you can follow along with their instructions here and you can download it there, but we're going to go to 4 releases up here, and we're going to get the 2019.1 release, and we're going to download the source code. So I'll download this here, and we can download that into our project files. Now I've already got this downloaded over here. Where's my here? So I've got the various files we need, and I can go into the assets folder, and here we have the tilemap folder, and I'm just going to click and drag. I'm going to go up to my assets folder here. I'm just going to click and drag tilemap into here, and it'll take a second to compile down here in the corner. And once it's done, we now have extra options that we'll be able to use in our game. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to my tiles folder and sci-fi tiles here, and I'm going to right click on this, and we're going to create tiles and rule tile. So I'm going to create a rule tile, and we're going to call this the wall tile. Then we need to do a couple of things. We need to give it a sprite to represent for us to be able to draw with it. So I'm going to grab from our art folder, where's our tiles, I'm going to grab this wall sprite, and then we have a game object to be instantiated. So I'm going to go to my prefabs folder, environment, and I'm going to grab this wall and pop that in there. I'm going to say it has no collider by default because the collider is on the wall itself. So now what I can then do is go back and grab this tile that we just created, the wall tile, and I'm going to drag this up a little bit, and I'm going to click and drag this so it's here. So now we have a new tile here in our environment, and I can now go, well, I'll keep my tile palette active, but now I can go over here, and if I draw that on the scene, you can see it creates the 3D object for us to use. So now I could go ahead and lay out a nice little area for us to run around in. I don't have to be too particular with it. Actually, I should probably switch to my rectangle tool. Probably make things a little bit easier. Oh, so you can switch between your different tiles now, and when you draw over, so if I get this little guy here and if I zoom in, if I just draw over this with a normal tile, you can see in our game view here, you can see it actually deletes the object from the scene. So it's really handy being able to do this. So we can draw our little level whichever way we want to. Let's draw a quick little area like so. Actually, I'm going to draw a little area, so I'm going to fast forward through this and we'll pick back up in a second. Okay, so we've got a nice little level set up here, so I can go ahead and if I press play now, we could run through this whole area. You can see we've got corridors, we've got walls all around us, we've got all this stuff. We can run around and explore, and it's super duper handy. It's very, very simple, and suddenly we've got a level that feels a bit more like a real level. The next thing we could really do is a ceiling area. So what I'm going to do is create another tile map. So I'm going to go to here, I'm going to get this, I'm going to right click on my grid here, 2D objects, and create a tile map, and I'm going to call this the ceiling, like so. I'm going to go back to my tile palette. I've got this that we can use for the ceiling. You can see my active tile map. Because we just created a new one, it automatically selects the ceiling, but we can switch back to drawing on the other level. We want to make sure that we have the correct tile map selected for drawing on. Then I can just get this guy, and I can just roughly draw in over the area. We don't need to be too exact. I'm not going to worry too much about this being perfect or anything. So we have a nice little ceiling like that. And then what I'm going to do is, with this ceiling selected, I'm going to go to layers over here. I'm going to add a new layer that we'll call ceiling. And I'm going to apply that to the ceiling. And the reason we do that is because if I go to layers here now, I can hide the ceiling in our scene view, so it's no longer obstructing everything. And then the final thing we want to do is make sure that the ceiling appears above the ground, so it acts as an actual ceiling. So I'm going to go to the ceiling here and put the Y value, sorry, not the Y value, the Z value to -1. So -1 will move it up above us, and now all of a sudden we're in an actual room. So it really feels like we're in this game. Now you can see our little enemies on the other side of that wall there at the moment. That's not really great for us. So let's, now that we have that, we can go ahead and start laying out our level with a few interesting elements. So I can grab this enemy. Let's pop this guy over here and another one down here. I'm just going to make one little change. And I'm going to put, oh no, I'm on the wrong tile map there. Make sure I have the ceiling selected. Pop this guy down here. So we've got a little room down here for us to use. Then let's make a couple more enemies. We'll put one more in this room and a couple more in this room up here. Then we have our health pickup, so I can grab my health pickup and let's put this, let's say we can get a bit of health over here. And where's my prefabs? Let's put an ammo pickup in here and another health pickup in here as well. So now we've got a bit of an area around us to explore. We can run this corridor. Oh, there's some enemies. We can shoot this guy. Shoot this guy. Then we've got all of this stuff here. We're able to explore all these areas. Oh, there's somebody watching us very scarily. Let's take him out before we get too close. Obviously, we could do it extending the range on these guys, but also you might notice that was very easy to spot that enemy in that room. So what we want to do next, oh, watch out for these guys. What we want to do next is make it so that we can't just see all our rooms around us all the time. We want to make it so that when you walk into a room, or sorry, before you walk into a room, there's a door blocking each exit. Now, one final thing we want to do just before we do that though, is to make sure that our walls actually stand out a little bit more. So at the moment it was fine when we just had one wall, but when we're walking around, it's very hard to see where one wall ends and one wall begins. At the moment, it's all just a big grey straight line. And what we're going to do to make things feel a little bit more natural, just very, very simply, the cube model, if we go back to our cube model folder that we started off with, actually has two different materials that it can be applied to it. So we can have cube layout and cube layout dark. And that's because two sides of it have one color and the other two sides have another color, potentially. So what we're going to do is go to my environment here. We have our wall. I'm just going to double click on it where we have our four-sided cube. And under materials, we've added wall 1 to both slots. So I'm going to go over here to wall 1. I'm going to duplicate it. And then for wall 2 here, I'm going to go to select. And instead of the brighter sprite, I'm going to select the darker sprite like so. Then we can go back into our wall prefab, and over here where we have wall 1 and wall 2, for wall 2 I'm going to pop that in there like that. So now if we go back out of this, and when we play the game this time, it'll refresh all those objects, and now you can see suddenly it looks like we have different walls separated out. So it's much easier to see the edges of our rooms. It's much easier to see, hey, that's the next room down there. If I could shoot these guys with any decency, that'd be good too. But you can now see that we're actually delineating the difference between these walls much more easily. You can actually get a much more of a feeling that we're in different rooms. So as I said, the next thing we need to do is set it up so that we can have some doors in our levels. And we're going to do that in the next episode. So thanks for watching. I'll be back soon with more tutorial goodness. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Follow Games Plus James on Twitter. Join the Patreon. Do all that cool stuff. You're all awesome. And I'll see you all very soon.